Right, everybody, it's lovely to have Dr. Tufail Muhammad with us here today. Dr. Tufail is a pediatrician by profession, and he is the immediate past president of ISPCAN, which is the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. Dr. Tufail is the chairman of the Child Rights and Abuse Committee in Pakistan, the Pediatric Association, and director of the Regional Training Institute in Peshawar. He has a postgraduate qualification in training in pediatrics, clinical pathology, public health, and reproductive health. Dr. Tufail has had more than 20 years experience in the field of child abuse and neglect and child protection, and has had more than 30 research papers to his credit, and has presented more than 60 papers at international conferences in several countries around the world. Dr. Tufail has also conducted and published a number of community-based research studies in collaboration with UNICEF, Save the Children Sweden, WHO, ILO and ECPAT International. He has also co-authored a book, Your Amazing Baby, on the growth and development of Pakistani infants, published by Save the Children UK. He's also authored a number of books on various aspects of child abuse and neglect and child labor. Dr. Tufail has twice received the Meritorious Services Award from the President and Prime Minister of Pakistan. So we are very, very honored to have him with us tonight to share his vast experience and vast knowledge on the subject of child abuse and neglect. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Tufail.
Thank you, Chrissy, for your very, very generous introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening.
Thank you. So, Dr. Tufail, tell me, how did you originally get into pediatrics? What interested you to get into the subject?
Well, Chrissy, I love children, like you do and everybody else do. Since my days at medical schools, I wanted to be a pediatrician. I wanted to become a pediatrician because it captured my heart. I always enjoyed being around children. The reason for that is that I knew that children needed someone who would understand them and their special medical needs. Well, the very word pediatrician means healer of children. To me, pediatric is a fascinating area of medicine because childhood, like every age, has its own peculiarities. But to me, the most rewarding part of pediatrics comes not only from healing, but also from the moments when we see a child empowered to take care of his or her own health needs and body protection. Yeah. So in a way, it's a very fulfilling type of specialty.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you went into pediatrics, otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do all this wonderful work you've done. Was your interest in child abuse and neglect related to your experiences as a pediatrician? Is that why you went into that?
Well, yes, exactly it is so, because pediatric is not only concerned with the immediate management of a child, but it's also concerned with the long-term quality of life, disability, and survival. I became interested in child protection soon after I joined my pediatric career at a young age. Well, besides treating sick children, I came across many children who had developmental delays, behavior problems, other disorders, functional disorders, psychological problems, and the children who in a way were abused. So that made me aware of the social stressors and challenges of parenting. For me, 1990 was the turning point in my career. Soon after the adoption of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and ratification of that convention by Pakistan, the Pakistan Pediatric Association constituted a child rights group within the association to coordinate all the work in the area of child rights and child protection under the banner of our association. I was made its first convener of that group. And that responsibility opened many opportunities and doors for me. And in that way, I got involved in child protection work, not only in my own area, in my province and in Pakistan, but also later on when I joined ISPCAN and when I became a member of other international organizations. So the scope of my work then expanded globally. So you are very right. The start was from the pediatrics. Yes, when I started my pediatric career. So in a way that led me to child protection work.
Thank you. Now you're just the immediate past president of ISPCAN. Can you give us a brief outline about this organization? It's an international organization.
Well, thank you very much for asking that. The International Society for Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect, which we call ISPCAN, it was founded by a Denver-based American pediatrician, Dr. Henry Kempe, who is, I think, a very famous child protection professional and pediatrician who first, in a way, described the better child syndrome. And in that way, the foundation of child protection work globally was laid. Dr. Kempe, through his own medical practice, recognized the tragic issues of child abuse and neglect. And he understood that it will only be tackled through the dedication of multidisciplinary professionals. And he just thought that we will need to take concerted and coordinated efforts through the multidisciplinary teams that we could tackle this problem in a better way. And in that spirit, he invited other child protection professionals at that time. There were some pediatricians, psychologists, and then there were people who were working in law enforcement agencies and for the education sector. And in that way, the foundation of ISPCAN was laid down. On July 7, 1977, the International Society for Child Abuse and Protection was established, what we call ISPCAN now. And its purpose was to promote opportunities and facilities for individuals and organizations which will, in a way, enable them and capacitate them to manage child abuse and neglect in a better way. So in a way, the basic purpose of the organization was to help child protection professionals everywhere, not only in the United States where the society was founded, but globally in all regions of the world. Today we have a presence on all continents in almost all countries around the world, and our richest and our true resource is our global multidisciplinary membership. So it's through the membership that we carry out all our child protection work, whether it is in the area of capacity building, research, or advocacy at all levels. Our structure is like that our office, the central office is in Denver, but we have regional resource centers in many regions around the world. And we also work through country partners. In many countries, we have those country partners who are affiliated with ISPCAN and carry its mission forward. You may know that we publish our flagship child abuse and neglect journal, and it's a very high impact journal that publishes cutting edge research on the issues around child abuse and neglect and child protection. We also hold international congresses every year in all regions of the world. And these are the venues where professionals from all over the world gather. So these are venues for exchanging knowledge, experiences, and best practices. And it also provides opportunities for advocacy at global levels and for networking of the professionals. So in a way, that is briefly our structure and the way we work. We have a board of directors who are responsible for the governance of the organization, or in a way for establishing its goals, objectives, and direction.
Wonderful. I'm a member of ISPCAN, and I find it wonderful. It's such great resources in the journal every month, and it's definitely well worth joining if you can. It is a great organization. What do you see as the future goals for ISPCAN?
Well, our future goals are determined by our strategic direction document. We had a strategic planning where we determined our future goals. So if I just summarize in few words, that on the top of it is that we want to be a leading international resource in the field of child abuse and neglect, supporting professionals everywhere. We want to expand our global reach through expanding, diversifying, and retaining our membership at country level. Well, we have developed strategic partnership with UN agencies and with other international organizations, and we want to build more partnerships and want to strengthen our existing partnership so that we could do better and in a way more impactful advocacy at global and regional levels. For that we need partners who are just international actors in the field of child abuse and neglect. So that is another thing we are doing. And our niche is that we are a capacity building organization for professional. So what we are doing is that we are developing more training packages and resources. So we are expanding our training programs. And that is, in a way, the benefit of membership of ISPCAN for its members. But these capacity building is not only confined to our members, but we are also reaching out to anyone who would need that help from ISPCAN.
Yeah.
We are also just devising ways and means to strengthen our advocacy efforts at global levels, because from time to time, some global issues which affect children happens in a way where we need advocacy with the national governments and with the UN agencies, so that we are also doing. And finally, our aim is that we want to generate high quality and cutting edge research in the field of child abuse and neglect, so that when people just form policies and programs, so they are better informed to the findings of this research.
The research side is so important at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as I said, that most of the time, our congresses where we disseminate this research, and our child abuse and neglect journal, these are just the venues through which we disseminate this research, not only to our own membership, but also to everyone.
Yeah, very, very important work. Very. I want to come to the pandemic now, Dr. Tufail. What do you think, what effect has this pandemic had on the children around the world?
Well, in a way, this pandemic has affected everyone, but in nutshell, if you think of children, they have been affected in three major ways. One is the infection by the virus itself, but fortunately, as far as infection with the virus is concerned, so children are not the face of a pandemic in that way, because they have not that badly affected, or the health consequences or medical consequences in children are not that severe as they are in other age groups, particularly old age group. But it does have some just effect on children. They do get infected with viruses. But the more important than that are the immediate socioeconomic impact of measures to stop transmission of the virus. For example, these lockdowns and isolations and the school closure. So those are impacting the children, I think, in a very detrimental way. And then there would be long-term effects.
Yeah.
Especially at global level, there will be delayed implementation and achievement of the sustainable development goals. Well, the COVID-19 has changed the context in which children live. These quarantine measures, well, as we witnessed, such as the school closure, restriction on movement, have disrupted the routine not only for children, but also for families. It has also affected the social support. And placing new stressors on parents and caregivers, we may have to find new child care options, or they may have to forego work. Especially the children and families who are already vulnerable due to socioeconomic exclusions, are those who live in overcrowded neighborhood in poor and developing countries. They are the ones who are particularly at risk, and they have been the most affected.
Yeah. I agree. I think the mental state of a lot of children is just going to be affected greatly for the next few, well, for a long time ahead. Do you believe there's been an increase in child abuse during this pandemic?
Yes, definitely. Well, I will just refer to some of the statistics that we know that the COVID-19 is changing family life. The UNESCO, which is the UN organization, they estimated that in the first wave of the pandemic, now many countries are in the second wave and even third wave, but even in the first wave, which was the most severe, almost 1.38 billion children were out of school. That's a huge, huge number. 1.38 billion children were either out of school or child care. They were without access to group activities, to team sports, or playgrounds. Parents and caregivers were attempting, and they are still attempting, to work remotely or unable to work. And the biggest problem is that people have no clarity that how long this situation will last. For many people, just keeping children busy and safe is a daunting prospect. For those living in low income and crowded household, these challenges are further exacerbated. And we can just think of some of the factors which enhances vulnerability of children during this pandemic, and the measures that have been taken to contain the pandemic. For example, there is reduced supervision and neglect of children. There is and it obviously leads to increase in child abuse and domestic and interpersonal violence, and increased psychological distress among caregivers and community members, increased obstacles to reporting cases, and also increased sexual exploitation of children that may use sex for assistance or due to loss of income, commercial sexual exploitation of children. For example, ECPAT International has noted that there has been a surge in commercial sexual exploitation of children. And there is a pressure on our lack of access to child protection services. Even during all these things, people don't have access to child protection services, let alone getting it. And then children suffer distress due to death of parents, family members, or caregivers. And already, for example, what I see in my country, so there is already worsening of pre-existing mental health conditions and pressure on those services. So all these things are put together, and the reports which we get from some of the helplines, in child helplines in many countries, that there has been a surge or increase in cases of child abuse around the world. Not only anecdotal evidence, but we also have some solid data from many countries that it has happened. And the problem with this emergency or pandemic is that we are still not sure that when it is going to come to an end, and maybe that in many countries the end will not be at the same time. Some will have those vaccines sooner, and they will have other public health measures in place. And for the poor this part of the world, and for the resource constrained countries, it may take much, much longer to get out of this situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the mental health of our children is just definitely going to have to be dealt with after all of this. You know, on top of all the physical and sexual abuse that, that they're going through.
Exactly. Also, Chrissy, I am a practicing pediatrician. I have a clinic in the community. It's a general pediatric clinic. But as a consequence of all these measures, I see a lot of children with anxiety and depression disorders, with nightmares, and with so many other psychological and emotional problems as a consequence of all that has happened to them or to their parents and their families.
It's so sad. Yeah, it's a very complex pandemic that we're going through.
Yeah.
As part of the UN SDG goals, I know there's a lot of goals that were set for 2030. Do you think this pandemic is going to have made a major setback, you know, due to the goals that the UN have put forward?
Yes, I think they had. Well, I think there has been, there will be an impact on achievement, negative impact rather, on the achievement of all these sustainable goals. But let's take the first SDG goals. For example, when we say no poverty, which is in a way the bedrock of all SDG goals. If we achieve that, then the achievement of the other SDG goal would be easier. And this crisis has made the SDG 1 goal, a reduction of poverty, very, very challenging, because people have lost their job, the world economy has gone down, there are economic pressures on the families. Globally, what the UN agencies tell us that 1.6 billion people work in the informal economy, which has been worst affected by this pandemic. And this 1.6 billion people is almost half of all the working force. So one can well imagine that how much impact it would have on the SDG 1 goals, which is just in a way linked to all other goals. Then we have statistics from the International Labour Organization, and they say that many people, almost in a way 1/3 or sometimes half the workforce, they are just in the danger of losing their livelihoods, because people in the informal economy have been the worst affected. UNESCO estimates that 1.2 billion students are affected by lockdown. Then we have statistics from UNDP who said that 86% children in developing countries are not being educated or were not being educated during the lockdown in the developing countries. Maybe in developed countries, the situation, because they have the substitute of the online education. But here, for example, in my country, when some of the schools and colleges and universities are online education, so in a way, it also revealed the big digital divide that we have. So people didn't have access to the internet in many areas, and they didn't have the gadgets. So the education, when education is affected, so the SDGs will definitely be affected.
Yeah.
So if all these better facts together, the loss of jobs, the economic pressures, the school closure, the pressure on the world economy and the global economy, and also the economy at country and local levels. So the achievement of SDGs is, in a way, will now be very, very challenging.
Yes.
And they will have to do some very extra hard work just to reach that dream agenda 2030.
Yes. Yeah, I think they might have to set it back a few years, but hopefully we can pull together. I think the one thing that this pandemic has done is pulled people together, shown that we can work closer together, and made people more aware of that we have to do that to get somewhere.
Exactly.
You know?
I think you are very right. There is that sense of solidarity, right? The whole world and everyone has been affected by the pandemic. And believe me, now as a public health professional, if I just wear my hat of a public health physician, so we know that no country will be safe. For example, if we say that the vaccine is just going to protect us for a while, maybe for 1 year or 2 years, we still don't know that for how much time the shots of those vaccines will provide immunity to us. So until and unless everyone on the planet receive that vaccine, this pandemic or this virus is not going to get away. It's going to stay here. It will variate and in a way bounce back. So I agree that at least now we feel that as a global community, we all need to come together and work together.
Absolutely. Well, they always say to bring people together, you need a common enemy, and our common enemy is the COVID-19.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Right. I want to just change the subject a little bit here and say to you, how big a problem is child labor and exploitation in today's world? I know that, this is one of your subjects that you deal in.
Yeah.
Is it still as a bigger problem as it used to be, or are we coming to terms with it?
Well, you know that child labor is a huge and complex problem. It's not something simple. When we say the term child labor, it is often defined as work that deprives children of their childhood, of their potential, and of their dignity. And the work that is harmful to physical, mental, or social development. It also relates to works that is mentally, physically, socially, and morally dangerous and harmful to children and are interferes with their education or schooling. For example, that work will deprive them of the opportunity to attend school or obliging them to leave school prematurely or requiring them to attempt to continue school attendance with excessively long and heavy work. The magnitude of the problem, for example, again, we have to rely on the statistics, the global statistics from the UN agencies. For example, globally, they say that ILO said that there are almost 152 million children who are engaged in labor. Well, the vast majority of those children are in Africa, followed by Asia, Latin America, and I think a very small number in Europe and North America, but mostly they are concentrated in Africa and Asia. And out of these 152 million children, somewhat 73 million are engaged in hazardous work, the work which is very, very hazardous to their health. Mm-hmm. Again, if you just in a way unpack it, then almost 70% are in agriculture, which is which is the most unregulated in a way and the most difficult to monitor and supervise, followed by services and industries. But the problem doesn't end here. Hidden in these statistics are again the worst form of the child labor. And these are, for example, the hidden forms of labor are sometimes not so hidden. For example, the children in slavery, when we say children are being enslaved, those in commercial sexual exploitation, child prostitution, what we call, and children who have been trafficked and separated from their families. There are some children who are exposed to very serious hazards. For example, there are children working in the mines under the ground. And then there are street children, who are on the streets of large cities, in a way unsupported by anyone, and they usually come to the streets at a very, very young age. So all these children are vulnerable to all forms of abuse, violence, and exploitation. Well, we know that many countries have laws against child labor, but unfortunately, in majority of those countries, those laws are very poorly implemented. And it is due to those poor implementation of laws that the menace of child labor continues. As some people say, that's a necessary evil, it's going to stay with us. And usually they say that it is because of poverty, but unfortunately, child labor may not be because of poverty, but child labor will perpetuate poverty, because we know that the children are exploited. They are the one who get the least paid for the work. For example, compared to an adult, they will be the least paid. So it is going to perpetuate poverty. So in that vicious cycle, these children are caught. It's a loss of childhood. It's a loss of their rights. And it is, in a way, is the group of children who are, in a way, vulnerable to all forms of child abuse and neglect. You just think of it, the physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, so any form. And from many sectors of child labor, especially those who are in the worst form of child labor, I think these children suffer in a big way.
Yes, definitely. Oh, and it's again a massive problem. So, because what do you do to change all of that? We have to probably educate parents on how to raise children better, and also I have found, since I've been doing my program with parents, that parents don't realize the detriment that child abuse does to a child. They don't realize all the terrible adverse problems that a child grows up with. And once they realize that, they go, oh, and so hopefully we can inspire them to realize we're harming our children, we're harming our future, by not looking after the children.
Well, the problem also lies, for example, in my countries and in many developing countries, the problem also lies in schooling. Yes. The sense is that the corporal punishment in schools, which just drives the children, they drop out of the school, that's a big issue, one. The other thing is that people think that when they send their children to school, well, they may just get literate or enumerate, but they say that they don't learn any marketable skills just to go out and find a job, so that they see no meaning in sending their children to school if they say that by the end of the day they cannot be find employment, or they don't learn any marketable skills. So in a way, the education has to be made meaningful for children and for parents.
Yes, yeah, I see that. That's important. As you say, especially in the developing countries, it would be seen that they want to better the children, and they want, when they come out of school, they've got something worthwhile, not just an education, a vocation.
Yeah, so that they could survive in the outside world. Yeah.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Yes.
Okay, the next topic is, I know many countries have signed up to the Convention of the Rights of the Child, prohibiting child marriage. But it seems a problem still in many countries, including even some parts of the USA, which children are allowed to be married at young as 13 years old.
Well,
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is a huge problem. Well, if we go by the Convention on the Right of the Child, the way it defines a child, whether it's a boy or a girl, that the age of majority is 18. Below that, any individual who is a boy or girl is a child. So by that definition, marriage below of whether of a girl or boy below the age of 18 should be considered as a child marriage, whether it's a formal marriage or informal union or whatever it is, but usually it's a formal marriage. But unfortunately, even the countries that have ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, we can still find that discrepancy in the age of marriage. For example, even in my own country, for example, for boys, it's 18, and for girls, it is 16. So I think that there is the double standard.
Yeah.
There also, and even that 16 is not strictly followed. From the British time, we have a Child Marriage Restraint Act in my country and also in India since 1929, but hardly anyone has been booked on that, because customary and culturally it's considered something normal. But many global surveys have indicated that, for example, if you ask questions from married women between 20 and 24 years of age when they were married, so the global figures show us that somewhat 45%, or almost half the women, were married before the age of 18, whether it was 16 or 15 or 14, whatever it was, but almost 45% got married before the age. So you can see it's a huge global problem. Some of the causes which are mentioned, well, everybody say, well, it's poverty, it's the bride price, it is the dowry, the cultural tradition, the religious and social pressures. Then there are regional customs, like in my area, they say there are exchange marriages. For example, from one family, the girl is married to the boy in one family, and in return, a girl from that family is. So sometimes one girl may have attained the age of majority and the other may be minor, but during exchange marriage, they will get married. So, but mostly they say that it is the cultural reasons are poverty. These are the two main things which are cited as reasons for child marriages. But as a physician or as a pediatrician, what for the most concerning thing for me are the health consequences of child marriage. Because a child is still, her body is maturing or growing anatomically, physiologically, and emotionally. And parenthood is something very serious, and they are not yet ready for that parenthood. And anatomically, for example, when the pelvic canal is not in a way ready for the birth of the child, so it leads to increased mortality, morbidity, and many complications as a result of child birth. For example, the fistulas, they are most common in girls who are below 18 years of age because of the pressure during that time. And then we all know that what impact it is going to have on their children. For example, they are still children, so having kids is a disaster. Yes. Because they kids and they themselves are also kids, so they are not ready. Parenting is not something very serious. It requires maturity, it requires some knowledge, it requires some skills, so they are not ready for that. Again, like the child labor, what we said, so all these issues are there, and mostly these are the girls who are suffering. Well, the boys also suffer, but mostly the brunt most of the brunt is taken by the girls. So the consequences for them are quite serious. And as I told you earlier, in my country and in many countries around the world, there are laws against child marriages. But the most poorly implemented are the laws against child labor. As I told you, since 1929, for example, it has been almost 100 years that we have just laws against child marriage. But hardly, I don't think that even in those 100 years, 5 people may have been booked or convicted.
Yeah.
On that count. And it's right here and there and it's everywhere that we have those child marriages. So I think as far the rights of children are concerned, and as far the rights of the girl child is concerned, for me, this is the most serious issue.
Yeah, it is. So do you think that the answer lies in education, educating parents, educating children?
Exactly, in education, and education in the sense, for example, education will do 2 things. One, it in a way creates awareness. At the same time, if a girl is educated, for example, even if a girl is going to high school or secondary school, at least she won't get married as far as she is in school. So automatically it will, in a way, increases the age of marriage beyond 18. So if we give that opportunity to girls to finish their high school or high secondary school, which usually in my country, they just finish higher secondary school at the age of 18 years.
Yeah, so we need to keep the girls in school. Definitely.
Exactly. There could be one way of just controlling it.
Dr. Tufail, my last question to you today is, in talking to teachers, because I've been teaching the My Body program around the world to different teachers, I find one of the biggest problems is that teachers are unsure of how to report abuse, how to report it, what to look for in abuse, and they're all worried about reporting something and it being wrong. So they tend to go, I just won't get involved. Do you think that we should really have basic child abuse prevention for all teachers around the world?
Well, you are very right. We do need a training of teacher on child abuse and neglect. As far as the reporting is concerned, I think different countries have different laws. It's not mandatory in every country. For example, in my country, it's not mandatory that teachers should report the suspected abuse or neglect to the child protection authorities. Maybe it's in the UK or in other countries. But keeping that thing aside, we all know that teachers can play their part to protect and care for children and young people in their schools and in their communities. Well, they can do so by building relationship with their students and showing that they respect and value them in the classroom. They value in the classroom. And they should be facilitating education on child abuse and violence prevention in the classroom. But you are very right. If they would like to do that, they themselves need to get their training during their teachers' training program. Teachers can also help abused children gain a sense of personal identity. They can ask questions that help children just to formulate a position on the issue of child abuse. Teachers can also teach students the decision-making and the problem-solving skills. And lastly, but the most important thing is that schools can teach children about body boundaries. That's what exactly you are doing in My Body is in My Body program. They can teach them about we also had some programs here in my country on pilot basis where we would teach children about the good and bad touch and how to avoid and escape the threatening situations. We'll tell them that what are the situations which are threatening to them. So in that way, the teachers have a very crucial role. So if we just in a way engage them in the child protection work and they get training so they can not only in a way identify the initial signs or the warning signs of child abuse and neglect in children and facilitate their management or work with families or with other child protection services. But they can also at the same time empower children to take care of their own protection needs. And I would like just to, in a way, acknowledge and congratulate what you are doing through your program of My Body is My Body. We have used some of those videos here in the schools, in some of the schools and in some other programs, and we have found them very powerful and impactful. So I think the schools must be doing that around the world.
Thank you, Dr. Tufail. I really appreciate that. Well, I think we've come to the end of our time, but it has been most interesting to talk to you and to have you as a guest. And I hope at a later time that you'll do this again with me, and we can, hopefully we'll talk in better times when we're not going through this terrible pandemic.
Yes.
And we're on the other side and things are getting better. So
well, I think the things have changed, as you talked about ISPCAN. So we used to have those 3 or 4 physical congresses every year. So last year we had to cancel, and this year in the June we are having our congresses have now gone virtual. So we say that we have a destination, Milano in Italy, where we are going to hold the Congress, but in fact we are going to hold it virtually. So the world has changed. So thank you
I've
very
signed
much.
up for that.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
Yes, and I wish you all the best for this year and for ISPCAN and for looking after all the wonderful children. Dr. Tufail, if you'll stay with me, I'm just going to close the live chat, and then we can go somewhere else. Okay.